Hello and welcome back to Trista's Reading Room. I'm your host, Trista Shea. Today we're going to be looking at Starganauts by C.E. Stone. This was published on June 19th, 2021, and I'm just going to read the back cover for you really quick. Katie Anderson was a new bride on her wedding day. Samantha Harris was an engineer who had given up all to follow God. Katie's reception is ruined when an alien gunship incinerates the surface of Earth. Rescued from the apocalypse by a strange prophetess, Katie, her husband, and 5 others are drawn across the galaxy. While the prophetess promises God has a plan, Katie grows increasingly desperate as their chances of survival and water supply dwindle. Samantha didn't ask to be God's prophetess, yet once she answers the call, the spirit leads her to an inhospitable world, with Katie and several survivors. Hounded by the master of the gunship, the Earthlings search for water as their alien pursuers close in. Only God's promise of a future in a distant city gives Samantha any hope of survival. But could the answer to all their problems lie in 8 mysterious orbs? This is book 1 of the Starganauts series. Book 3 just came out in May, and there are going to be 12 books in this series. This book and this series are for ages 14 plus. The author says that there is violence, heavier themes, the incineration of a planet, the villain is sometimes cruel to his henchmen, and a nightmare scene that could frighten younger readers. You can find the first 3 books in paperback and ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple Books, and other major retailers. Here's a little bit about the author. C.E. Stone is a tutor by day, Christian author by night. She lives in a desert like the one her characters endure. The wife of a chronically ill husband, she tutors a host of students between writing her next book and plotting a galactic takeover. Winky face. A plant mom with a half-green, half-brown thumb, C.E. enjoys sketching and digital photo editing in her spare time. She created Starganauts at the age of 10 as stories she acted out with Legos. Though at first a fantasy writer, she told her best friend H.M. Elrich about the Starganauts universe one day. For 2 hours. Afterward, H.M. insisted she write everything down. This book is the result. C.E. hopes to follow in the footsteps of her favorite authors, Tolkien and Lewis, albeit with a sci-fi twist. She says that she wrote Starganauts to glorify God and edify fellow believers. It's her prayer that Katie, Samantha, and the team's journey will entertain you and encourage you in your walk with Christ. You can find C.E. Stone on Instagram at CE_Stone, and I will throw the links up as well as in the comments, and then of course you can go to our website afterward to find out the information about this book and series as well as the author. C goes on to say that Starganauts was inspired by Star Trek, Star Wars, Titan AE, Lord of the Rings, and StarCraft. In fact, its cinematic influences run so deep that she originally created it as a mock TV show. The Lord of the Rings influenced the formation of her Gorvan galaxy, the place where most of the action occurs. Her faith also inspired the series. While most of the franchises that shape her were secular, she wanted to create something like them, but Christian. Thus, Starganauts was born. And I'm going to read the first chapter for you today. Chapter 1. The Prophetess. Judgment! Samantha Harris's words echoed in the marketplace square of the coastal town of Vogel Bay. Shoppers shook their heads and muttered under their breath as they passed by the crazed woman. Samantha Harris's reputation for being mentally ill preceded her, and today was no different. Society had learned to ignore her weekly rantings. "The world will end!" Samantha cried, lifting her arms skyward. "Doom will fall before the sun sets, but there is hope. Believe in the Lord Jesus. Believe in Christ the Son, and look on him for salvation, and he will show you the way to life." "Hogwash!" a man shouted, and a boy threw a tomato at Samantha. The vegetable hit her clothes, but didn't leave a visible stain on her red sundress. She stood on a dais in the middle of the market square. Crowded with many tourists and residents, and surrounded by Vogel Bay's poshest shops. 2 policemen moved toward the dais after her last statement. At the same time, a man in coveralls rushed forward, speaking quickly to the men. The officers halted and waited while Matthew Sanchez approached his cousin.
"Samantha, I think you need to go home now,"
he said gently. Samantha came out of her fervor and raised an eyebrow at him. "I will not be silenced," she said in a low tone. "Not even by you, though you doubt. The Lord has given me this task to save as many as can be saved. You agreed to help me salvage the old shuttle, but when it comes to my message, you suddenly change your mind. Today is the day, Matt. The hour is come. It will descend from the sky."
"The police are finally coming to take you away."
Matthew Sanchez gestured imploringly.
"People have put up with you for a while, but their patience is running out. Is that what you want? You've been doing this for 7 months. What makes you think people will listen?"
"I just need to pray." Samantha glanced at the officers for the first time. "Please let them know. I won't run, but I must discern whether the Lord is done using me here. I have things I must do before the gathering."
"Yes, Prima, of course,"
Matt said, using the Spanish word for cousin. He felt relieved to finally get through to her. He knew Samantha wasn't crazy in the mental sense. She was simply too avid a Bible reader and too obsessed with end times prophecy. Samantha dropped her arms and cast her face downward, her springy curls falling forward. She closed her brown eyes, and after a long while, Matt saw her lips part in a smile. She leaped down from the dais and linked her arm through his. "My work here is done for the present," she announced cheerfully. "Take me home, Matt. We've got another load of rations to deliver, and then I've got a wedding to attend."
"You're still going through with this?"
"Primo, if I don't go to that wedding, Sharko and Katie's marriage will end today. Many events in a distant galaxy won't be set into motion, and we won't be living our destiny."
"Sure. Whatever."
Matt's tone dripped skepticism as they neared the parking lot. Matt took the opportunity to shake his head before sitting in the driver's seat and closing the door. Samantha climbed into his idling car, and they were soon speeding along the palm-lined road to her house. Why had he even agreed to go along with her insane plans? Although Matt couldn't fathom his cousin's obsessions, every moment spent with her caused him to question his own sanity. The cool sand squished beneath Katie Cox's feet as she walked barefoot along the beach of Vogel Bay. The ocean's pleasant roar filled her ears, the violent tides of night settling into calm eddies of morning. Buildings peeked at Katie over the tropical flora, overshadowed by high mountains which backed the small town. The red rays of the rising sun tinged the heavens a goldenrod color, bathing Vogel Bay's resort hotels in a soft crimson light. Cars began to dot the highway and streets, increasing in number until the sparse lanes flooded with their daily deluge of traffic. Despite the hurried atmosphere, a pleasant calmness pervaded the monotony. For most, it was a typical coastal day. But for Katie, ordinary was the last way she'd describe it. "I can't believe I'm getting married today," Katie thought to herself, nervous but unable to keep from smiling. "On this very beach. I'll be enjoying my life with Sharko Anderson's. Wow." Derek Sharko Anderson was a truck driver by trade. He had spent long hours hauling cold goods to save up for their wedding. Katie had met Sharko in college 4 years earlier. Her fiancé had only made it to his junior year before financial difficulties forced him to abandon education for survival. Truck driving had offered a decent pay, but horrible hours. Sharko started attending Katie's church when he could, and it was there the two grew closer, their friendship blossoming into romance. Now, after saving up and renting their first apartment, Sharko would welcome Katie under the same roof as his wife. It blew her mind, but she recalled more pressing matters. Hair, makeup, and dressing needed to be done. Bridesmaids' photos taken. Katie's brain raced with the amount of things to be accomplished before the clock struck 4. It didn't matter. Her best friend, Nancy Cooper, would oversee the details. Her aunt had also volunteered as their wedding coordinator. Katie felt a thrill of happiness as she imagined walking down the aisle with her father. A pang of regret tempered it. Sharko's parents wouldn't be present to witness the occasion. They had died in a plane crash when her fiancé was 17. Even now, 8 years later, it still brought sadness to his face. Katie knew how hard it was hitting him, particularly on this day, their wedding day. Once, she tried to comfort Sharko by pointing out that her parents were present. The Coxes were longtime friends of Sharko's, and almost like surrogate parents. Yet, this did nothing to alleviate his disappointment. Katie paused to enjoy the salty air that whipped her hair in every direction. Then she turned and trudged inland, refreshed and relaxed. Going on a walk before the fuss of wedding preparations had been Nancy's idea, and Katie felt thankful for it. The rest of her morning passed in chaos. She had never felt so much fuss being made over her, but she secretly enjoyed it. Finally, after much curling, styling, painting, layering, and blending by various beauticians, Katie emerged looking more radiant than before.
"My goodness, you're more beautiful than you were at prom!" Nancy exclaimed, surveying her friend with a broad smile.
"I can't wait until Sharko sees me," Katie exclaimed, bouncing in her seat. "You're a gorgeous maid of honor yourself." A blush spread over Nancy's cheeks, but it was true. Nancy's straight coal-black hair was plaited in an ornate bun, her sapphire eyes framed by subtle shadow, and her plump lips tinted a cherry red.
"I'm a plain Jane compared to you,"
she shot back, and Katie turned and admired herself in the mirror. Pinkish eyeshadow that matched her lipstick brought out Katie's light blue pupils, while caramel brown hair crowned her head in curls. Nancy handed her friend a gorgeous bouquet, which Katie nearly dropped as she tried to tilt it forward properly.
"Don't worry about the bouquet."
Nancy's words were kind, but she couldn't hide a grin.
"They say when you're in love, your brain goes out the window."
"Pray yours will follow out the window someday, too," Katie remarked cheekily, and her best friend laughed. "Think of it, Nance. I'm spending my last moments as a Cox. In a few hours, I'll have a new identity. I'll be Katie Anderson. Our wedding will take place, and the rest of our lives will begin." Samantha Harris's house was a cramped 2-room bungalow. Really, in Matt's opinion, it qualified as a shack by the sea. The uncertain dwelling sat upon an outcropping of cliff, the waves crashing against the natural jetty before bursting into 1,000 drops of spray. Inside the cramped space was its usual mess. Newspaper clippings and verses littered one wall, while the other boasted neatly arranged pictures and wall decor. How aptly it suited his cousin. Part of her personality revealed the engineer she'd once been, rational and logical. The other part displayed chaos and confusion. Yet one thing he knew to be true. She had good intentions beneath her Bible thumping.
"At least she's living by the Bible," Matt thought, "instead of arguing with me at the mere mention of Jesus' name."
He remembered the day his cousin had approached him with news of her salvation. A feather could have blown him over. While he'd been delighted at first, her extreme behavior soon worried him. The back wall of Samantha's dwelling culminated in a single huge window that overlooked the restless ocean. Matt thumbed through a pile of unopened bills on her kitchen counter, noting that the newer ones were marked urgent.
"Sam, you do realize you haven't paid these?"
He raised his eyebrows at her.
"Are you spending all your money on food, water, and canned goods? I don't understand it. You quit your job. Your job as an engineer. You haven't even paid rent. What's wrong with you?
The world is coming to an end, Samantha said factually. Today is the last time we'll walk upon this terrestrial soil. What bother our bills when Earth is to be decimated?
Doesn't Revelation say that no one will know the time?
It does, Samantha cut in, grabbing a handful of canned vegetables and stuffing them in a bag. That's speaking of the end of time, when God will bring all things under judgment and create all things anew. Heaven, earth, the planets.
That again?
Matt asked tiredly.
I believe you if you weren't so E.T. about this.
The universe is so much bigger than we can comprehend. Samantha's voice quavered in wonder. If you'd only seen what I did, Matt. The Lord showed me stars. Not just our stars, but planets with different constellations in other solar systems, in another galaxy. One day Earth will be repopulated, and the events in Revelation will take place. But for now, judgment. Humanity will be severed from Earth for a time, much as Noah was severed from land.
Why?
Matt asked.
I thought God was supposed to be loving. Would he really kill all these people? The entire world?
Do you think when I say judgment, I refer to his? Matthew Sanchez, God is allowing evil to triumph only for a time. When I say judgment, I refer to the judgment of someone upon this earth. Not even I know who, but I'm aware that any who wish to survive must come with us to the tower.
I hope you're right.
Matt's irritation came out in his voice.
I wasted a lot of weekends fixing up that old shuttle for you.
On the contrary, you do well to wish I was wrong. Samantha's words caught Matt by surprise. She handed him a case of bottled water and shouldered the bag of food. El Señor es paciente con nosotros, no quiere que nada perezca. God doesn't desire that anyone should perish, so neither do I. Her badly pronounced Spanish broke some of the tension between them. Being only half Latina, Samantha hadn't grown up speaking Spanish as Matt did. God has a purpose even in this, she continued. These next months will be harder than anything we faced, but he will get us through them. Remember that. A man in black and yellow board shorts dashed along the beach. His chest heaved beneath a black rash guard which matched his hair, and his skin was covered in droplets. The early morning waves lapped gently onto the shore, but urgency radiated from the young man's face. Sharko Anderson and two groomsmen stood further down the beach, waiting to get their pictures taken. Sharko had a kind rectangular face and wiry build. He was slightly taller than the muscular newcomer. As the man approached the small gathering on the beach, Sharko's face lit up. "Dude, man!" The truck driver smiled and gave his friend a manly embrace that ended in a noogie. "Or should I call you James today?"
"Sorry I'm late, dude,"
James Erickson said, shifting his feet self-consciously.
"Hey, it's okay,"
Sharko countered.
"You made it in time for photos. Late would have been right before the wedding."
The two chuckled, and Dude Man slapped Sharko on the back. As childhood friends, Derek and James had conjured nicknames for themselves. Derek's was Sharko, after his favorite sea animal, while James chose Dude Man because he loved surfing.
"I caught some sick waves this morning,"
Dude Man said, removing his sunglasses.
"I scored a 20, got second place. I just wish the competition hadn't been before the wedding." "Don't worry,"
Sharko said wryly.
"We'll catch you if you start floating away."
Dude Man entered a changing stall adjacent to the beach's restrooms. Sharko and his groomsmen waited until James emerged in a tuxedo. Then all four men posed for the photographer. Meanwhile, Nancy Cooper put the final makeup on one of Katie's bridesmaids. One of her hobbies was doing makeup, and she had slender and nimble fingers that allowed for skill in both her hobby and vocation. Nancy worked as a secretary at the local police station, typing up reports with legendary speed. However, her original choice of vocation had been nursing. Nancy had wanted to be in medicine from a young age, but failure to pass the nurse's exam stifled those hopes. Thus, her secretarial position. Katie still remembered the day they'd met, even though they'd both been in kindergarten. As an only child, she'd considered Nancy to be like a sister, and picking her to be maid of honor was a given. Sharkowitz siblings and one of his younger brothers served as their groomsmen, the other being off in the military. Yet Katie's only immediate family members were her parents. Her mother currently stood with her, making final adjustments and speaking words of encouragement, between exclamations of how beautiful her daughter looked. Katie felt nervous, joyful, and lightheaded all at once. The hour finally came, and she took her place at the chapel door. Outside, guests sat in white chairs arranged before a brick pathway through a grassy lawn. The path culminated at a beautiful gazebo twined with purple flowers, which sat on a dais in front of the sandy beach. The pastor waited beside Sharko. The bridal procession began. The guests alone noticed a stiff wind and graying skies as the bridal procession threaded its way down the walk. Katie peeked through the window of the chapel door and watched as her mother and the bridal party walked down the aisle. She hesitated slightly, biting her lip to keep back a wellspring of emotion. Her father laid a comforting hand on her shoulder. She took his arm, reminding herself to hold the bouquet per Nancy's instructions, and marched out into the sunlight. Her father's arm guided her down the paved pathway of happy destiny. She did not notice the guests stand. She paid no heed to the girls who gaped at her flowing gown, or the women who squeezed their husband's arm, in remembrance of their own special day. Her eyes transfixed on one place alone, Sharko's face. Her soon-to-be husband was beaming with emotion too wonderful to describe. Disbelief, joy, and amazement washed over him like the pounding surf on the shoreline. Her heart pulsated with delight. Everything seemed so wonderful and perfect that she almost doubted her wedding could be happening. Sharko slid his broad hand over hers, and they faced each other. Before the Lord and happy spectators, she pledged her life, heart, and future to the man smiling down at her. Her days as a cox drew to a close, and her future as Katie Anderson began. Matt Sanchez drove as fast as he dared along Shoreside Road. Samantha urged him to go faster, but he reminded her that a speeding ticket wasn't something he needed. Shoreside ran parallel to the ocean, rising in elevation until they were zipping along the coastal cliffs. Mountains towered above them and clouds started gathering. Matt slowed through a particularly bad turn, knuckles white around the wheel. At last, they arrived at their destination. A barbed wire fence surrounded the flat, grassy surface of a promontory containing a single building. The tower, as locals called it, was perched on the edge of a sheer-sided peninsula like a nesting hawk. Waves dashed against the cliff face of the promontory, and the tower's seaward side had rusted from the relentless spray of the ocean. The landward side displayed the bright colors of the Space Administration, with its faded logo near the top. The cousins approached the fence. Matt unlocked the gate with his key, then helped his cousin carry in their latest haul of supplies. The tower's interior was dark and ribbed with metal and piping. Its conical roof appeared retractable, but in the middle rested the most amazing feature of the building. In a deep pit, surrounded by a gantry, rested a space shuttle. Most of its booster engines sat down in the pit, yet they were so tall that they rose above it some 20 feet. The body of the shuttle rose much higher. Samantha treated the sight as if it was ordinary, but Matt marveled every time he entered the tower. The 100-foot shuttle had come from a deep space expeditionary program. This model possessed more compact boosters, a shorter tank, and a thicker hull than other craft. It was also designed differently, having a conical body, the exterior of which connected to 6 rocket boosters. Between these jutted 6 wings, each inset into an engine. A metal ladder spanned the shuttle's exterior, leading to a door in its middle deck. The brainchild of a local scientist, the project had been abandoned a year before due to the defunding of the space program. Matt, being in the scrap and salvage business, had taken the worthless shuttle as something to tinker with in his spare time. The space program had removed all of the shuttle's important gadgetry, leaving Matt with an empty shell that he would have dismantled but for Samantha. His cousin had pleaded with him to repair the shuttle. Since Matt enjoyed working with his hands, he was easily persuaded. However, his weekend project brought new and often unwelcome surprises every month. Somehow, Samantha procured rocket fuel for the craft. Outdated electronic equipment, first aid kits, and solar sails followed, until Matt realized she was trying to make it space-worthy. Her story about the end of the world had convinced him at first, but months of hard labor were causing him to question. Now, as he strained to carry a heavy pack of water cartons up the metal ladder, he chastised himself for consenting to his cousin's whims. He was certain what they were doing must be illegal, yet his mechanical side felt that restoring a condemned spacecraft was rather awesome. He deposited the cartons in the shuttle storage bay and shook his head. There were enough rations, toiletries, and supplies for an army. He suspected his cousin's unpaid bills were the result of funding this, but she didn't seem to mind. Her apathy both intrigued and annoyed him. "Well, that's taken care of," Samantha said cheerily, glancing around. "Let's hurry back to the bay. We've a wedding to attend."
"Whoa, espera un momento."
Matt placed a restraining hand on her arm.
"Earth is about to go boom or something, and you're headed to a wedding?"
"Katie is someone the Lord told me about. She and her husband are integral to his plans." Samantha followed up her comment with a determined look, which Matt had often seen since their childhoods. He shrugged and turned toward the door. That facial expression rendered all arguing pointless. Matt drove his cousin back to Vogel Bay. She directed him to park in the plaza lot once more. The quickest route to the beach was through the marketplace, and as Matt followed, he noticed something wrong with the weather. The day had started sunny and warm. Now a brisk wind whipped his cousin's hair back from her face. The bottom of her sundress was flaring out, and ominous storm clouds began forming directly overhead. Shoppers paused in the plaza, gazing at the sky and pointing at the looming tumult. For once, Samantha wasn't drawing their attention. A storm at this time of summer wasn't uncommon, but something about this one seemed wrong. It was spreading across the entire horizon. A middle-aged woman made a remark that the major cities were experiencing a similar phenomenon, with storm clouds even in the deserts. Matt stopped walking without even realizing it. The heavens felt menacing and paralyzed him with a fear he couldn't explain. Only his cousin's arm brought him back to reality. Yanking him toward the street that led to the ocean, she walked hurriedly across the square. Katie Anderson stood in front of the bathroom mirror in a bit of a stupor. The ceremony had passed in a rush. She had paused for her bridesmaids to adjust her skirts and to simply look at herself in disbelief. She was a married woman. Katie had so much to look forward to, and to be. The best part of it all? Spending her future with such a wonderful husband like Sharko. Nancy finished sorting out her skirt layers, which had been whipped into chaos by the wind. Bride and bridesmaids then entered the grand wedding reception room. Katie and Sharko had rented this place at a discount rate from a friend. The floor of radiant marble glistened beneath lights that added cheer to the space, while white table linens, fine silverware, and glass rails made everything feel elegant. The tall roof contained a series of skylights, normally affording a view of the picturesque blue sky. Today, they served as portals to the storm overhead, affording the guests an occasional flash of lightning and the steady drumming of rain on glass. It was abysmal how the unexpected storm picked up during their wedding. The gray clouds, heavy with the threat of rain, had caused them to rush the ceremony. Now all of the guests sat safely indoors, no longer prey to the elements. The busy reception commenced. Katie and Nancy approached a long banquet table, elevated from the rest of the floor and situated by an open space for dancing. A waiter pulled a chair out for the bride, and Katie sat down and tucked the voluminous skirts in around her. The man she had just married ceased conversing with his best man and turned to greet her. Sharko looked exceedingly handsome in his tuxedo, with his brown hair combed back and his hazel eyes sparkling. She felt his hand taking hers, and she gazed into his eyes and could not help but beam with joy. Most of their friends had been confused when the wedding invitations were sent out for Katie Cox and Derek Anderson, largely because Derek went by Sharko. The trucker felt that his given name was too bookish for his occupation. As a big rig driver, some people looked down on him. Katie didn't care. He was a gentleman and the finest man of character she knew, and it hadn't been hard to fall in love with him. She smiled as she thought of recent events. Sharko gazed at her with a puzzled expression. "What?" "I was just thinking," Katie remarked. "You were on time for our wedding, but you're usually late for everything else. You know that's going to drive me crazy when we're older."
"It may, but I bet it doesn't now."
Sharko grinned, tickling her side playfully. Katie fought him off in mock protest. Soon she was leaning her head on his shoulder. Their food arrived and she scarfed it down. There wasn't much time to eat after all. She and Sharko gave a toast of thanks to everyone involved, and then they rose to cut the cake. They'd barely returned to their seats when Dude Man leaned toward Sharko, a worried expression on his face.
"I hate to mention it," he said, "but do you hear that?"
"What?"
"The thunder,"
Dude Man said.
"It's getting louder and it's steady."
Sharko stiffened, and Katie listened intently. For the first time, she noticed the noise. It was like a constant droning. And Sharko started to speak when a cry of alarm escaped from one of the guests. The woman's eyes seemed glued to the ceiling. Everyone looked up at the skylights, and Katie craned her neck to behold a sight that took her breath away. A massive object blocked out the light. Black, tubular, and lower than the clouds, it was filling up the stormy sky and hanging directly above them. And that's it for the reading of Starganauts today. You can find all the information about the author and the books on the website. You can also find them on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Follow her on Instagram and find her on her website as well. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you next time.